I would now like to tell you about our guest speaker for today's event. Violeta Aguilar Wyrick is the founder and the principal of Zara Public Affairs, which is a full-service public affairs firm based in Riverside, California. Zara Public Affairs specializes in social impact strategies, capital infrastructure development, community engagement, public policy, governmental, and public affairs. Zara has broken barriers, leading successful strategy, field communications, public policy, and governmental affairs efforts at the local, state, and federal level for candidates, labor unions, and corporate clients. Violeta's philosophy and impetus work is tied to her life experience as a Mexican immigrant and as a labor and community organizer working in policy and politics in Southern California. With close to 20 years of experience, Violeta has led successful labor, community engagement, issue-based policy advocacy, and electoral campaigns. She has advanced successful initiatives that have bridged community development and resident engagement that have resulted in equitable, sustainable, and inclusive policy changes that have improved economic development for the clients she serves. Violeta graduated from UCR in 2009 with a BA in Women's Studies and Labor Studies. Then she earned her Master in Public Policy as part of the inaugural cohort in 2017. We are so excited to welcome her back to campus. Please join me now in giving a warm welcome to Violeta Aguilar Wyrick.
Hi, thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody being here and everybody that's joining us online. Thank you, School of Public Policy, UCR, my alma mater. I would not be where I'm at. I would not be standing here if it was not by the many gifts that UC Riverside, the UC Riverside community has given to me. So before I start, I want to thank everybody because I know that there's a lot of community people that came today. But my audience today, the people that I'm speaking to, the people, who are really tailor this talk is UCR students, undergrad, graduate students, because I was there in your shoes not too long ago, I wanted to first and foremost start, and hopefully leave you with a little bit of practical advice, a little bit of just some knowledge that I've learned along the way. I have been doing community political organizing for many years since I was in high school, so I don't feel like I'm that old. I feel like it was not that long ago that I was a student here at UCR, but given the fact that I did start organizing and doing political campaigns since I was in high school, I have been doing this work for about 20 years, which for those of us that have been doing field work, if you know what field work and campaign work, that's a long time. So I'm ready to retire, and I have tried to go to retire and campaign work, but my friends keep pulling me back. So first and foremost, no, it's not working. Uh-oh. Now it's working on the. So first, let's see. Now I wonder if it was because of this one. I'm so sorry. Leaving. Oh, there. Oh, perfect. Okay. Oops. Uh-oh. I'm so sorry. Sorry, you guys. So I'm in a while we figure this out. This is not the first time. So this last year, I was asked to do a little speech at for Lego. My brother works for Lego headquarters in Denmark. And I was 10 minutes late into that presentation because I could not figure out Teams. And it was not my fault. I totally blame it on Teams, and I could not log on. So so that was my my international debut with Lego, and yeah, so this is not too bad. Anyways, so first, I just want to kind of start by why the monarch butterfly and why that is significant, not just to me, but I think for many of us immigrants. So if I can just, I try to also do this very interactive. Another thing about how I like to facilitate training. So whenever I'm doing my presentations, you guys have a little bit to learn from me. I have a lot to learn from you guys, and you all have a lot to learn from each other. So, why the monarch butterfly? Like, why, if you guys can share just a little bit, if you are an immigrant, why, for many of us migrants, many of us that have had to do that trek to another country, another place, why is the monarch butterfly? If you guys know why is that significant? Anybody? Don't let me hanging. Yes. Right. So there's a lot of symbolism around the monarch butterfly, oh my gosh, this is every time I think that I change. Excuse me. So I am so sorry, you guys. I think every time that I switch, if not, I can just I have kind of like an idea, but I just need this to go back to the. So anyway, so why the monarch butterfly? So at the most basic level, how is it? That's not. Is it only working like for you? Oh, there. So yes. Okay. So yeah. So there's so migration, resilience, cultura, belonging, community, but most importantly, that's my home. So home is Michoacan, Morelia. So Michoacan is where every single winter the monarch butterfly goes for the winter to hibernate. So, beyond the symbolic meaning of what the monarch butterfly means for myself and many migrants, like at the bottom line, that's home for me. So, every time I'm just gonna stop touching this. So this is home. So that actually I took that picture the last time and actually the first time. It took me a very long time to go back to my hometown. I've lived here. We moved here when I was in 2001, when I was only, and I'll show some pictures. 2001 when I was only 15 years old. But I had not gone back to Mexico. I had not gone back to my hometown. I had gone back to Mexico. I had gone back to visit my grandma in Acapulco. I had gone back to go visit, to obviously like Valle de Guadalupe, but I had not been able to get myself to go back home. And so this is me. So this is little butterfly. And it took me a very long time, and I've been doing a lot of self-reflection as to why, one, it took me so long to want to go back to my home. But the second thing, why, just going through this journey, and this particular last couple of years have been especially very significant for me. I have a 15-year-old son now. As he was getting into that age of 15, as I was reflecting back into my journey, the decisions that my parents had to make. And by the way, here my mom and dad are here in the audience today, so super grateful for them for making those decisions. But I see myself in the age that I came and a lot of the path that I took and how that shapes the way in which I think about the world, the way in which I move, in the way in which I do my work has to do with first and foremost this little girl and giving her a voice, because for a very long time, especially when you're a migrant, when you are someone that in a society you feel unseen, you feel unheard. So giving her a voice. And then obviously there's always been like that little overachiever in me, and I'm sure in many of us, there's always that chip on our shoulders that like have us like work harder, try harder just to be able to be in the places and to be at the table, to be able to make decisions not just for ourselves but for our communities. So 2001, literally 2 days after my quinceañera, so that was like my goodbye party, we moved here to the United States. So that was a very bittersweet moment, obviously celebrating having that milestone that it is for any Mexican girl to have your quinceañera, and to have that as your, traditionally when we think about our quinceañeras, we really think about our coming of age and our introduction into society. But for me, 2 days after that very important milestone, culturally, I was uprooted and we moved here. And that really, I think that, in the moment, I didn't realize the level of impact, but obviously making a major life change, like moving to a completely different country where your family's not there, it's a new language. I will add a caveat though, that my migration story is also very different from that of many. So I moved here, had a visa. I had gone to private school most of my life. I had a certain level of English, already. So when I moved here, I was able to initially, because there's many assumptions about how, the low academic achievement of our community, I was placed in non-college classes. And through many, many amazing mentors, and I really wanted to add this picture, and I tried so hard, but again, technology was just not cooperating with me. But this is Barbara Chavez, this is Jesse Valenzuela, and for folks in the community that know, these are folks that have really shaped the Inland Empire, that have really mentored so many of us to this day. Ms. Chavez, unfortunately a few years ago passed away, but the impact she was my mentor when she was the instructor for MECHA, so that's Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. And when I first moved here, and as I was going and figuring out, like I want to go to college, I know that I'm smart enough. I had amazing teachers like Mr. Saldana, who I was in his shelter class my very first year of high school, and he said, you know what, I'm going to put you in my physics class because I think you'll do well. So it's these people, that have continued, that pushed me, that saw something in me, that put me in the spaces and the places to take opportunities for me to ultimately to start doing the work that I was doing, because it was through that one of those advocacy campaigns that we did through MECHA, through Ms. Chavez, that I was part of. At that time, Fontana City Council was trying to get the Fontana Lewis Library open on Sierra Avenue. Prior to that, there was no library, so there was literally a little tiny room like by City Hall, and that was like the library that the city of Fontana had. So we rallied my classmates and all of our MECHA to do cards to send to City Council. And obviously at that time, one of the council members and Ms. Chavez were like, okay, we need all the MECHA kids to like fill out this card, like let's go. And we're like, okay, like we need the library, but not recognizing, not realizing that that's the hard work of policy change. Those are the little steps and that little tiny bit and how that first experience, when I was in high school, has now become the work that I do. And then through also this work, I'm also getting involved in my first campaign through Jesse Valenzuela. At that time, there was a county supervisor race, assembly race. So that's kind of how high school, out of high school, I was fortunate enough, worked really hard, graduated with honors, and I was able to come here to UCR right out of high school. And again, my journey at UCR was also not very typical. I was not your traditional student. I got married very young. I got pregnant and had right when I was going to finish my last year of college, I gave birth to my first son, who's now 15. So by the time that I graduated with my master's in public policy, I had, and by the time that I was going to school for my master's, I was working full time. And I'll talk about it a little bit, but I decided that it was a good idea to switch jobs in the middle of it, and then I got promoted twice, but that's a different story. But the point is that through every single step of my academic journey here at UCR, and that's one of the things that I felt that it was so special. And here is one of my professors, one of my undergrad professors from UCR, Dr. Pia Chatterjee, who was, she was such an instrumental piece. And I took her class. It was one of the very first women's studies classes that I took. And through her classes, when I realized, and she was teaching global women organizing, and the way that women around the world organized around issues that first and foremost affected them, affected their children, affected their families. So when we think about if you're taking a theory class or any of those, your policy classes, when you think about, at the end of the day, when it comes to politics, when it comes to policy, it is so true, the personal is political. Because at the end of the day, when what's going to move a community is what's going to affect them in their day-to-day, what's affecting their children. So with that, and having been, I graduated in 2009. So it was in the middle of the recession. I mean, I would say 75% of my classmates decided to go back to grad school. When we did the commencement speech, when I went to the commencement speech, and the keynote, they raise your hands. How many of you have a job? How many of you have, are going back to grad school? How many of you have actually landed a job? There were very, very few of us that actually had landed a job back, to that 2009. However, I was able to land a job at my first labor union. And if you're going to take notes right now. And the way that I was able to land a job, and I'm not saying that it's always going to happen that way, but in Spanish we say, el que no pide, Dios no lo oye. If you don't ask, you shall not receive. So I was able to land my very first job at a labor union by going and talking to one of my professors here at UCR in the Labor Studies Department, Dr. Reese, who she's still here in the Labor Studies Department in sociology. And I told her, I'm looking for a job. I really, I have some political campaign experience. I really want to do union organizing. By that time, when I was I was an English tutor, so I was part of the staff union. So I was really interested in, continuing to do organizing. I love organizing. And she said, sure, let me see what I can find out. She sent out, sent her my resume, and she sent it out to folks. And then I got a phone call from who then became my boss. So ask for help. Professors, folks here in this room are always willing to ask for help. So I landed my very first job at SEIU in 2009, United Healthcare Workers West, representing hospital workers. My very first assignment was representing healthcare workers at Riverside Community Hospital. Then I got added Hammond and Menifee hospitals. But one of the things, and during my time, my first initial stint at the union, because I went to the union, then left to go work for the Senate, then came back. But my first my first time going in and working for the union, and when I was an internal organizer, so I was a union representative. So I was representing workers on their day-to-day. So grievances, making sure contract enforcement. But the most important one was we were in the middle of a contract campaign. And if you guys don't know, Riverside Community Hospital and many hospitals throughout our community, they may have community in their name, but really they're corporate owned. So they're owned by very, very large corporations. So when we're bargaining those contracts, we're not bargaining with the local CEOs. We're bargaining with the, you know, the corporate headquarters folks that are flying from Florida, they're flying from Tennessee. So, and our hospital here, Riverside Community Hospital, it's owned by one of the largest corporations that privately owned hospitals. So during that contract campaign in 2010, you know, and I was fortunate enough through my other, you know, to kind of see throughout the years and unfortunately see the impact when hospitals, when a lot of, you know, they don't listen to their workers. And we saw that really, you know, with the pandemic in 2020. And a lot of the work that we laid during that 2010 campaign, and then 2016, which is when I was field director, 2017, when I was field director for SEIU 121 RN. So after, so I went to, I worked for a healthcare workers union, then went back to work for state senate, then I went back while I was here doing my master's to work for a nurses union. So that was in 2016. So during that second round of union organizing, coming back to a nurses union, I initially came because we were in the middle of working on a workplace violence and organizing and working with Cal OSHA to go through the rulemaking process to implement workplace violence regulation into Cal OSHA's code. There had been a bill that had been signed a year or two prior to that campaign in 2016, 2017. Then going through the rulemaking. So, you know, one of the things that as you're looking at the whole public policy process, you know, and you know, you know, there's the bill, and you know, when you have the governor sign your bill, you're like, yay, we did it. Well, not really. There's a whole lot of other work that needs to happen, you know, because then it gets, you know, goes to administration, and those are the ones that ultimately are in charge of putting into and like creating the rules and how those rules are going to be administered. So in that case, bill got signed. Cal OSHA was the regulatory body that had to come up with the rules, and for us as labor, so actually that picture, the one on the very far, that was the day where the Cal OSHA rules were adopted. So we went up to Oakland, and we were able to advocate for some key pieces into that rulemaking process, which require for hospitals to include the nurses and the healthcare workers when they were putting together those workplace violence policies. So, and then from there, we internally as SEIU, we wrote curriculum. So we actually partner up with UCLA Labor Occupational Safety and Health Program and Cal OSHA and UC Berkeley, and we actually wrote curriculum that was then implemented and rolled out throughout all of SEIU locals statewide. So this is one way in which we were able to, you know, and we also added a multiple approach. So it was not just the enforcement, it was the education and training that we incorporated into our training that we were doing with our members, but then also the bargaining and incorporating that into part of every single one of the collective bargaining agreements that we were having with employers. And during this time as well, obviously, this was 2017, 2018. If you're familiar with labor history, this was around the time that the Supreme Court Justice made the Janus decision. So if you're not aware, if you're familiar with the Janus decision, that was a decision that basically made it very, very, very difficult for unions, especially in the private and the public sector. So most union density in the United States is in the public sector. So made it very difficult for them to organize, and basically created as a situation where every single state was a right to work unless they had other regulations. So for us in California and for us in the private sector, it works a little bit different when it comes to like labor law, the way that, how union membership and some of that collective bargaining happens. But at the end of the day, all workers were under attack. So during this time, we had in SEIU what we called our Together We Rise campaign, and really was a nationwide effort to basically organize all of our workers and make sure that every single one of those people, became aware, became part of the union, and also, basically stood up for the right to collectively bargain and to because at the end of the day, when it comes to building power, when it comes to workers, unions are an equalizer, right? There's never going to be a day when workers have the same amount of money, when they have the same and obviously there's a power dynamic when you're going and talking to your employer, but the bottom line is that union and your work, and as the workers, and your unity power is really what uplifts, and what makes the change. And these two ladies, so this was, they led the very first nationwide here in Riverside Community Hospital in 2020. They led the very first strike that had nothing to do with economics. Generally speaking, when you think about strikes in labor, you think about strikes that have to do with economics, right? That have to do with pay, a lot of it have to do with respect. The reason why the majority of workers decide to unionize is about respect. And how do you show respect? In many ways, is how you pay your employees. But these women here in Riverside, in our community, led and really have been at the forefront, fighting for patient safety, fighting for patient care. 2020 was a very traumatic year for healthcare workers, especially when, like I said, some of these ladies, including Michelle, who my very first, when I was a little 22-year-old going into that very first time hospital, Riverside Community Hospital, and she was one of the stewards. So the stewards are the union members that work at the hospital. And she looked at me and she said, "Girl, they're gonna eat you alive." And I said, "Michelle, just give me a chance." And I just did this picture just last month. They just had their info picket. So it's, so they did not eat me alive, but she taught me. So I learned a lot. I told her, I need to learn from you. But since 2010, and again, because particularly in this campaign, these HCA campaigns, I had been part of both as part of UHW. Then when I was with the nurses union and I was leading the field campaign and I was doing a lot of the collective bargaining, we saw, like, the nurses had been asking, they've been saying, and when you have healthcare workers pleading with their employers in 2010, in 2016, in 2018, in 20, if something happens, like if there's a pandemic, things are gonna be bad. In 2020, I actually had a little bit of a tiny little contract where I was helping bargain a contract with one of these employers right when COVID was, the floodgates were opening. And they showed me their health and safety rate, policies. And I said, well, what's your policy? And they're like, well, this is it. And it's like, well, if this is a policy you're following, then I'm sorry, but you have community spread all over the community that you're serving. Because there was no safe ways, and healthcare workers have been so left behind. But anyway, so please support your healthcare workers. And one of the things, and I'm just going over kind of what I remember, because I'm not even gonna try to mess with the notes. But one of the things that I, and whenever I do any training and whenever Anybody that as an organizer, my very favorite kind of way that I move through conversations, and I always, and I like to think about like what our job as an organizer, whether it's political, community, is, you have to go through all of the steps, agitate, hope, urgency, you. And one of the mistakes that we often make, and, as we're thinking of campaigns, policy, communities, that we agitate, like we just like, we're just, this is wrong, like we have to do this, like, but we can't stay in that state of agitation. We can't stay in anger. Like if we're only organizing and if we're only moving and talking to communities, and we're always just in like, this is wrong, then we're not giving people hope, right? And that is a huge, like, to be an effective organizer, to be able to effectively be able to build power, you have to, give people those glimmers of hope. And sometimes that hope is not going to be that full thing that you envision, but giving people hope, giving those little wins, because then that's when, they continue. It's this, like continuous, and instead of staying in a state of agitation where like, we're all just mad and we're going to do something about it, but what's that? So like, always be in any campaigns, whether it's policy, political, union, be very intentional about giving people hope. And sometimes even when things are hopeless, like when millions of people were about to lose their union, they organized, they talked to their coworkers, they signed those membership cards, they signed up those COPE, Political Action Committee cards, so that they would be able to continue and keep their union. And there's an urgency, there's always a deadline, I don't care, there's always a deadline. And the most important thing is that we all have a part to play in each one of these campaigns. So from there, again, like I'm kind of going back and forth just because I've been, kind of went from the union to the Senate, back to the union. But in between, kind of like leaving the union, so 2012, so like now I'm jumping back on time. So 2012, this was when right after redistricting, Senator Roth, Assemblyman Medina were running for office, Congressman Takano. This areas had been historically very much Republican red areas. So during that time, there was a lot of organizing that was happening. You had Mi Familia Vota, you had SEIU, you had the campaigns. Everybody was knocking on doors. I mean, in fact, there's some folks that are currently elected officials that, like, we met organizing back then, right? So in 2012, Senator Roth, so I had the privilege during that 2012 campaign to run the PAC. So there was a bunch of unions got together, SEIU, AFSCME, to help a few candidates here. And here Riverside County was a target. So Senate District 31, Assembly District 61 was it. So we Senator Roth I got to run that campaign. We had, we hired people from the community. We had some hunger workers knocking on doors. We were talking to mainly Latinos. Latinos are a very, very hard community to mobilize to get out to vote, but we successfully mobilized thousands of voters to come out and vote. And we really, I see that 2012 campaign and all of the organizing that all of the people, all of the different groups did was really kind of a really, really big foundation for the work that we see now, and for a lot of those policy changes. So again, it's like that little by little, step by step. So so the first picture, so that was when Senator Roth got sworn in. We were just young, hopeful that, made it, we're here. As so that time it was ACA enrollment. I had some really cool stats that I wanted to give you guys, but I'm not going to be able to give you those, except that what I remember, one of the things that the project that I really feel proud about during this time was it was ACA enrollment. Affordable Care Act had just been implemented, so there was a big push, for enrollment and to make sure that people knew that the healthcare insurance was available for them. And before Cover California kind of like set up their process, we were a brand new office. All of us, Senator Roth, Assemblyman Medina, Congressman Tucano's office, we were all trying to figure out, like, and those of us that were like staff, in the office actually doing the work, and the constituent work, we were just trying to figure out what we were going to do. So as an organizer and, coming from healthcare, that was, and healthcare was one of the policy areas that I covered. I was like, well, you know what, like, we need to figure out how we're going to enroll people. So our region, the Inland Empire, Riverside specifically, we were one of the very first ones to start organizing ourselves and creating roundtables, so we were very much at the forefront, and we were very much, ahead before even Cover California brought in like a staff person to, help us. So we were doing enrollment clinics. We started doing enrollment clinics very early on, partnering with school districts, partnering with libraries. That picture is actually the very last clinic that we did in the city of Jurupa Valley. And that was one of those where rolled up your sleeve, and all of us as staff, we were there enrolling. And what's really cool about this part of constituent work, this part of community work, is that you really see in the ways in which institutions, in the ways in which being part of a Senate office really, really can make a huge difference in people's lives. When they called you, I was not, part of, I was not, in a legislative office during 2020, but I know that many of my friends that work in legislative offices, EDD cases every single day, so these are the very tangible ways that in which, community work, we can really make a difference. That picture is like also, that frame on the top, that was some of our Sacramento and the district team, but that was taken right after SB 21. I think it's SB 21 was signed. That's the bill that funded the UC Riverside School of Medicine. So without that bill, we would have never had the School of Medicine. In fact, during the 2012 campaign, funding the School of Medicine was a huge campaign issue, because we did not have the leadership. We did not have the political will to fund. So to sit and to be like, we did the work. We got someone elected. We worked very hard. And now we have a School of Medicine here in Riverside. And then the last one that I'm super, super proud of is the Pathways to Higher Education. So this is a conference that we started out of Senator Roth's office, and really, giving credit where credit's due. Patricia Locke Dawson, who's currently running, she's our current mayor. At that time, she was a school board member with the Riverside Unified School District, and she came to me and she's like, you know what, I really want to do this conference the way that this other senator in Orange County does it for our students. Can we work together on that? So we did. So it was myself, Patricia, another person from our Riverside Unified School District, and then from there, now this is the flyer that I got from last year, I believe, is now a district-wide event. Now it is an event that is serving students, not just at Riverside Unified School District, but also Jurupa Unified School District. It's also an event that Assemblymember Jose Medina, Assemblywoman Sabrina Cervantes, Congressman Mark Tucano. So this is an event that started, as an idea that is now serving thousands and thousands of students, and now my 15-year-old gets to benefit from it. And so that was a lot of work between 2012 through 2019. A lot of travel, a lot of long nights, a lot of being away from home, a lot of sacrifices. And finally, in 2019, I decided that I needed a change. I felt like I had, not just gathered enough skills, but also I found that I'm not an office person. I'm a 100% field person. I cannot do office work. I've also found more and more the type of work that I want to do, the type of impact that I wanted to create, and working for a union, working for an elected official just didn't feel like right anymore. And finally, in 2019, I decided to just venture on my own. Terrible time because I did not expect that 2020 was going to happen, but it was necessary time because right when I time checks, perfect. So right when I started my firm, and right when I decided to go on my own, my dear friend, now Councilwoman Gaby Plasencia, was in the middle of her campaign. She had just finished running her primary campaign, and she said, you know what, like I really need some help to get me through the general. So she asked me to join her team, so I did. So in 2019, that late summer, I joined Councilwoman Gaby Plasencia's campaign, and we fought very hard. It was a very difficult campaign. Like any time you are, you have, new blood, you have power changing, so there was also, I think what we saw during 2019 in that campaign, way before then, most people did, was we really saw the ugliness around QAnon, the racism. One of the very, I think it was like the second week that I joined Gaby's campaign, she received a letter at her home, basically like QAnon before we all knew what QAnon was, like very scary stuff. And that carried over through not just 19. I think that, obviously, and during that 2019 election, once again, there was a lot of work, not just from our campaign, labor, really, really came out to support candidates that were going to be, that reflected more our community here in Riverside. And with that, we were able to successfully elect some of the youngest council here in the city of Riverside 4 years ago. There was a lot of great things that have happened, but there's also been a lot of very difficult things that have happened. It's like a pendulum. When the pendulum goes one way, it also, goes back the other. So unfortunately, and again, because it had already been building and, not just here at the local level, but, everywhere. 2020 political was just a very difficult time. So here in the city of Riverside, the way that it manifested itself, and and I can do a whole other talk, and I'm not going to go into too many of the details, but ultimately, what resulted out of a lot of those very difficult conversations, and George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and the civil unrest that was happening throughout the nation, really helped us to identify a policy window where here in the city of Riverside, we were able to organize our community and mobilize to declare racism a public health crisis. We had seen for so many years, and as somebody that's been, peripherally or not, or sometimes at the table, sometimes just a staff, just taking notes, sometimes. But I have seen firsthand the way in which our communities are not always represented, in the way in which our community is not always seen. So that's really a big part of what drove my work, and a lot of the kind of, and during this time, I was not doing the declaring racism as a public health crisis that I did supporting Councilwoman Gaby Plasencia was not something that I did as part of my firm. That's something that I did as an individual, as a Riverside resident, as somebody that believes, in making sure that we are creating institutional and we're actually creating policy that embeds, equity, that actually addresses those systemic issues that our community was really, really asking for answers and to address. So, but before that, right before pandemic, working for the Elizabeth Warren campaign was also super incredible. Working for a federal campaign is very different than working for a state or local race. I got the opportunity to staff and to be part of the Iowa caucuses here in Palm Springs. Super interesting experience, and I know this is going to be a super unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it because I really truly believe that caucuses are the most undemocratic and they need to be abolished. And the amount of resources spent in Iowa compared to what we could be doing organizing communities like the Inland Empire. But you know, that's just politics and that's just campaigns, and campaigns and politics and money, it's a zero-sum game, and you have to maximize where that money goes. But you know, during the Warren campaign, one of the things that we actually were able to Julian Castro came to the city of Riverside, so I got to introduce him, and during this little interaction, he was actually acknowledging me and my mom, and talking about his own experience growing up with an immigrant mom. So that was a very special moment. And then the other Warren picture is actually Councilwoman Gabby Plasencia. During this time, she was one of the endorsed. And this was the very first event. We actually got some coverage. We have a very large deaf community here in the city of Riverside. So the Warren campaign hosted the very first deaf event. And Danny, she was our organizer, so she her first language was American Sign Language. So it was very special to be able to create those spaces and from a campaign of inclusion to make sure that our communities can be part of the campaign. And then this picture is the last one, going back to the Declaring Racism a Public Health Crisis. This is my son, my baby, who was with me throughout the whole time, listening to that testimony and just you know, really being part of history and understanding that, you know, what in order to create these changes, there's a lot of really hard work and there's a lot of organizing. And we actually had, for this meeting, when we declare racism a public health crisis, we had hundreds of people show up. Just to kind of like close it out, you know, because and like, let's have a little bit of time. The big kind of like arch and the big thing that I want to, you know, is that every single experience, every single campaign, every single one of those are what allowed me to come here and be here, and it gives me the skills and has given me the ability to now, you know, go back to my hometown in Morelia and stand proud and be like, okay, little girl, like wearing your little butterfly wings. You know, I don't want to say I've made it because nobody, you know, none of us have made it, and there's a lot of things that like I still have not figured out. So like nobody ever figures it, like has it fully figured out. So please do not ever, you know, expect or think that any of us that are speaking over here have it all figured out, because we do not. But the most important part that I think that really I've come to recognize and to really embrace is that all of those things that I thought were hindering me, all of those things that I thought were the barriers that, you know, that were the things that were making it harder for me. And I'm not gonna lie to you, they do. There is a higher standard, there's different expectations. So, but at the same time, that those very same things were the things that have given me the ability and has allowed me to stand out, has allowed me to bring in a different voice, to bring in a different perspective, to be able to really, you know, like be that person and navigate and understand. And kind of going back to that other slide, is like, I'm a little bit from here, I'm a little bit from there, you know, like I really, you know, I'm in my world, and, you know, my gift to the world, like I always often think about that, like what I'm really, really good at, and like no matter what hat and I've worn many hats in my career, and I expect that, knowing now what I know about myself, I'm probably going to be doing something completely different than what I'm doing right now in like 2-3 years from now. And that's okay. That's my journey. That's how I thrive. But what I'm really good at, what I love to do, what is important to me is I'm a really good organizer. And what's a good organizer? A good organizer is somebody that can find people's motivation and move them into action. An organizer is somebody that can give people hope and inspire them to find that is going to motivate them intrinsically. Not like what I'm going to tell you, not because, like there's tacos or there's this or there's that, but like what is that, going back to my, undergrad years, learning about like that early, those women organizing in Dr. Pia Chatterjee's class really comes down to those politics of care, right? And those and wanting to create a better life for my kids, wanting to create that legacy, wanting to have some very, very difficult conversations. For those of you that are doing community work, with whom we've done community work, we've had some very difficult conversations. We continue to have some very difficult conversations. Going back to Councilwoman Gabby Plasencia, a big issue around that time, and was affordable housing. Guess what? Affordable housing is still an issue right now that we have to continue to advocate and to organize. But at the end of the day, the picture in the middle, that picture is with my parents' nonprofit, my mom. We were able to send a truckload full of clothes to Mexico. We have through our partnership with Forever 21, our nonprofit, Bordando Nuestras Raíces, we've been able to distribute hundreds of thousands of dollars of clothes throughout, not just here, Southern California and all over California, but we were able to send some to Mexico. We've had some other community events, but at the end of the day, like all of this, everything else that I'm talking about comes down to my want, my need, my desire for that little Nina to be seen, and then also and to be heard and to have a voice, but also for my voice, my children, our community, to also have that hope for a better future, that hope that we've laid foundation so that I'm not saying it's not going to be hard. I'm not saying that you're not going to have to work hard or there's going to be any less barriers. Hopefully we've made it a little bit easier for you, but they're still probably going to be there, but you continue the work. And as public policy students, I know they're going to continue the work. And the real legacy is not on the campaigns. It's not on, the people that, elected. It's not, on the regulation or, bill that you got passed. Like that's just product. That's just the outcome, right? The real legacy is in the relationships that we create, because those are the ones that endure. And those are the ones that at the end of the day, it's all we have. We only have each other. We only to take care of each other. You only have a hope that we can find a tribe of, people that share your values, that, again, you may not always agree on everything. You may not always agree on tactics. You may not always, agree on, but at the end of the day, can you move a little bit closer to that goal? And in campaign world, I've really, as an overachiever, I like winning, it's really hard to kind of like, because especially in campaigns, like you win or you lose, like that's it, but having the maturity and having the ability to step outside of that, like that is not just winning and losing. And as you can see, over many, many years, every single one of this campaigns, every single one of these conversations, every single one of those people has had an impact, not just on myself, but in every single person that I then interacted with. And that is the real legacy that, hopefully, again, we go back to our legacy community of hope, like butterflies, we continue to, go from like flower to flower, pollinate a little, we go hibernate, we rest with our community, but we continue to fly, and we continue to fight for ourselves, for our community, and for a hope for a better future. So thank you. That's it. And I hope that it was like I ad-libbed some of it. I mean, almost all of it, because I couldn't go to my notes, but I hope that it made sense.
Thank you, Violetta, for such an inspiring talk. We will now move on to a Q&A session with our audience members. If anyone in the in-person audience has any questions, please kindly come up to the middle aisle and speak into the mic so our Zoom audience can hear you. And for those in our Zoom webinar audience, please go ahead and input your questions via the Q&A feature, and my fellow Dean's Ambassador, Priya Prashant, will raise your hands to pose your question to our speaker. Oh, yeah, right there.
Hey. My name is Greg. I was Hi. Sure. This is the first time.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you.
What advice would you want to give to somebody that would want to go into consulting?
First I'm going to address the organizing question. If you want to get into organizing, all you have to do is just get involved. There's so many opportunities to get involved. Right now, actually, one of the things I wanted to cover as my closing is there's an election happening literally next Tuesday. Voter turnout for young people is dismal. So you want to get into organizing. I started, my very first campaign, like I said, when I was in high school, knocking on doors, talking to people. So get involved. So there's whether it's in a campaign, whether it's a policy issue, there's a lot of different areas and different ways. There's community groups that are doing amazing work. Maribel over here, I want to give a shout out. She's doing incredible work around affordable housing. So there's many opportunities for folks to get involved on organizing. And at the end of the day, we're just talking every single day. We have conversations with our friends, with our neighbors. We're doing the work of organizing. Consulting, there's different kind of theories. I have a theory about consulting, because what a consultant does is you're basically self-proclaiming to have an expertise on something, right? So anybody, especially there's, can say, well, I have an expertise on this. So I think if you want to go into consulting, first and foremost, define your craft, define what is the thing that you want to be known for, what is the thing, and then from there, just network a lot, ask a lot of questions, surround yourself around, great mentors, and continue learning. It doesn't matter. Even, I just went back to school last year. As I've been transitioning a lot of my work into different projects that are more development, finance related. I never took a finance class as an undergrad, so I was really feeling like I had a gap in my skill set. So I went back and I did a certificate program at USC, for minority students to entering real estate and finance development. So, so continue to always learn, and, even once you do become the expert, there's always so much more to know. So
just
Sure.
I'm very questions.
Yeah.
As an employer who also wants to try to come to this. I public housing and it's through this guy. He's actually my roommate, or like my old roommate. I lived with. He was like, "Oh my gosh, I was helping out in 2022 campaigns." That's how we help out in this campaign over in the street. So I guess my next question would be, what skills do you have learned to be like and be a director for one business? And how will it apply to this?
Well, so I was collective bargaining director for the union. So that was when I was working for SEIU 121RM, so I'm representing nurses. My role during that time was to basically, it was a brand new department, so establish the whole process of how we were doing, we were doing the field campaigns and integrating that with collective bargaining, and the process of, bargaining a contract with the employer. And again, using that as an opportunity to organize. There's no better opportunity to organize your workers than when there's bargaining, because everybody wants to know what's, on their paycheck. Everybody wants to know, so everybody's asking questions. So really using that as an opportunity to find leaders that are then gonna go and enforce our contracts. So that was, and what I will say about like what I learned, kind of like what's this, like, that during the time of like collective bargaining, what I really, 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 and I wish more people had the opportunity to do collective bargaining, is that, especially when you're having to manage thousands of workers, at a facility, and you have to manage expectations, and you have to, make sure that everybody at the end of the day, when you're done bargaining that contract, they're going to sign it. I think the hardest part is like really navigating and like really making sure that you're that people understand, that you create realistic expectations. So I can go into so much more, but that's that. And then working for the Elizabeth Warren campaign as the regional organizing director, covering both counties. I think for that one, what I learned is that, well, there's a lot of things that I learned during that campaign. Let me give you I think when it comes to, and especially working for a candidate, and I'm a numbers person. I've been running campaigns for a long time. Like I know, I knew that, the chances of Senator Elizabeth Warren winning California were not, the best. So again, managing those expectations. So my definition of success for that campaign was not necessarily, can I get Inland Empire to vote for Elizabeth Warren? Are we going to win? That's not what winning. And I think for me, what that meant was that I got to meet amazing people like Karen, and now we get to organize together in so many different campaigns. And, her partner, gave some incredible trainings to myself. And, so again, it's the people. It's so, yeah.
Starting and promoting there, they consider really all this.
I think the biggest for me is like, I know how to do the work really well. I'm really good at what I do. I'm not afraid of working hard. I think starting my own firm, starting my own business, if I could go back in time, I would take some business classes. I mean, like actually, I never, my parents were business owners, but I once I landed that job in 2009 with the union with a pension and a car allowance and full health insurance and a great salary I thought I was set for life. I was like, I will never quit this job because I am set. So I was not expecting that I would go into entrepreneurship. Obviously there's a lot of growth that, led me to this place. But I think that that's, for me, at least in my journey, in the way that I came into entrepreneurship, which is why, again, like I went back and I took that, course at USC last year. I was actually considering even doing an MBA, but decided that $200,000 worth of, student loans is just not worth it. When I have an incredible master's in public policy. Yeah, I think that would be the
Somebody is trying to decide like go like from a national level of organization to the local level. Would you say that there's like a different approach between two levels, like working with CTO versus working with one?
Yes. So working local, national, state level is very different, the way that you approach organizing, the politics, the players, the policy, and kind of like the impact. And we're really like, I can't tell you which one's better, or which one's, easier, faster, but, because each one, if you ask, anybody, like I've never worked in Washington, D.C. So like the extent of kind of my like federal kind of like policy work really lays more on like the campaign and more on like the collaborations that we did when I was working for the Senate. But I do know, I had some, some of the, the one thing that I will say though, is that if you are able to volunteer or work in a presidential campaign, and you are interested in federal level type of policy work, whether it's in the administration or it's, any other, entity at the federal level, definitely volunteering and being part of that alumni network is really, really, because there are a number of people, when Biden was elected, they tapped into this Senator Elizabeth Warren's alumni network to fill a lot of those jobs. And, there's a lot of, just people that do go. So again, political campaigns, and working with those folks is a really good way for you to in turn start learning some of that. And what ends up happening a lot of times more like at the federal and state level, that it shouldn't happen as much, but it still does, is, you at the local level, it's not as partisan, you're talking a lot more of kind of like trash being picked up, a lot of those like bread and butter issues, whereas like at the federal level, you're talking about like big P, like big policy, but one of the things that I love about here at the School of Public Policy, and when you look at so much of the work, is that, really like when you think about any policy issue, whether you decide to work on it at the local level, state or federal level, is that, solutions for the region, solutions for the world, and kind of how the global is local and the local is global. And I don't know if that answered your question, but I hope that was just practical advice on how to, it really just depends on kind of how I personally have been enjoying very, very much the local stuff, but that's just because I like to see change and result happening a little bit faster when you're working on like some of that federal stuff. It's oftentimes a lot slower, there's a lot more process, bureaucracy. So again, it just depends on the pace. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Hey.
I got two questions. Kind of brief. what communities do you aim to serve?
What communities do I aim to serve? I think that right now, most of my work is I've been working more with private industry. But ultimately, as I look at the work lately, like the communities I aim to serve are communities that look like mine, are communities that, like our community here in the Inland Empire, where we have issues around affordable housing, where we have issues around workforce, where we have issues around economic development, where our communities have not, there's a disconnect, oftentimes between what happens in the private sector, what legislators and policymakers want, and what community wants. So like there's, and then there's all, kinds of stakeholders. So I think that for me, what I've really been enjoying and the work that I've been doing is like, I've been able to find kind of like that sweet spot where community, labor, industry, policymakers intersect, and how ultimately, again, like with the lens that I have, with the background that I have, with the understanding that I have of communities that look like ours, how do we make sure that we're communicating effectively with those stakeholders so they all have the same information? So like the way that, there's the way that you communicate with each audience is a little bit different. So I think that that's, if to give a very broad stroke of kind of what population, where it's and the type of projects that kind of have been coming my way are like the type of projects that are coming are like those projects that are not very easy projects, or those that requires very difficult conversations with communities, some very difficult conversations with different stakeholders to ultimately, bargain, which, is that collective bargaining skill set comes in very handy to ultimately get to that better policy outcome. So,
So I added,
yes, you can all add me on LinkedIn. Please feel free.
And well, I was looking through some stuff about you and consulting. I came across Azure Intelligence or something. You helping with something. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no. So Harvest Landing and some of the projects that I've been undertaking lately, working with developers, affordable housing, commercial, industrial developers to basically bring together and bring projects into the community that the community is gonna want, that are necessary, that are going to bring in economic development, workforce development. So that is currently a project we got started about 3 years ago. So what my firm, what we did is we went door to door, collecting surveys throughout the city of Paris. We knocked on thousands of doors. We collected over 1,800 surveys from the community, basically asking them what they wanted to see in this very, very large property, land, a piece of land in the city of Paris. And one of the things that ends up happening, and I'm sure, this is one of the very, very difficult conversations that are currently happening in our region, are around land use, economic development, industrial development, and what does that mean for our region, and how are we navigating between the different pressures, right? What is possible to build, because there's some land use restrictions in some areas, right? What we're able to build, right? Because at the end of the day, and that's part of kind of going back to school, and learning pro formas and learning the economics of development, and really understanding, like what is the market going to support? What are we able to do? And then ultimately, what the community and other stakeholders are going to support. So, so this is a project, so it's a mixed use project, industrial, commercial. So out of those surveys that we collected, over 1,800 surveys we collected, 65% of the surveys were collected from actual conversations, either from a door-to-door conversation or phone banking. Out of those, we found that over 1,600 people in the community of Paris supported, to bring in the type of development, the type of commercial, because what they really want is amenities. What people in that community of Paris, they really want to see shopping center. They want to see somewhere where they can come and hang out with their family. They also want jobs that are close to home so that they're not commuting, because at the end of the day, one of the largest challenges that we have here in our region is the fact that the type of jobs that we're able to create. So how are we moving the conversations beyond just industrial development? And we're moving those conversations and demanding accountability around workforce development, around economic development, around what jobs and what type of pipelines are we creating, not just, in the city, but with our K-12 partners, with our universities, with our community colleges. So this is just one of the very many, ongoing. We're going to continue to have continue to have to this day some difficult conversations around this. But at the end of the day, it's like, how do you balance and how do you make sure that everybody is able to uplift our communities one project at a time, one conversation at a time? You're welcome.
So thank you so much for the talk and sharing this. I have something there's two questions. One is, how do you find clients?
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, are you hiring? And if so, what skills would you need for?
Okay, so how do I find clients? I'm honestly word of mouth. I'm actually, thankfully, very busy. And the type of projects that, like I said, I'm working on are some very large projects, and I'm mostly on my own. I do bring in people, as I need to. But I really like the way that it's relationships. It's those, again, if I can't emphasize, if there's anything that you get out of this talk, is the importance of developing relationships, because you never know. That one high school student that's going to walk into your office is going to be eventually writing policy for Senator Lola Smallwood's. Been here in front of you guys 2 weeks ago. So I'm talking about Omer. So I met him when he was a high school student. He came in and he was like, I'm working on some policy work with the American Heart Association. So can you help me? So you never know, where, that intern, that friend. I mean, if I was just going back through all the pictures, and just looking at kind of the last 20 years, the people that we've been working and organizing. I mean, Maribel, we've been organizing for how many years now? So that's really, yeah, all of my work is just word of mouth. And then I do hire. I was hiring a few weeks ago for campaign stuff, but we're about to, campaign stuff's winding down because election is next. But for the most part, I if I'm hiring for field staff, so people that are going to be, organizing, so being able to talk to people, have conversation, making sure that I am a self-starter, work hard, motivated, so organizing, it's a skill that you can learn, and I love training people, so you all can add me on LinkedIn again, or I have cards too. I can give you guys my cards too, but definitely network, and just put yourself out there. Just put yourself out there. Like, a lot of that is it's word of mouth, but it's also going to some of those networking events and just talking about it, and just get really good at and I don't, and I've gotten better. I haven't always been good at this, but just get good at explaining what you do and the value that you bring in, and what sets you apart from everybody else. Because I will tell you this, community consultants like myself, dime a dozen. There's a ton of us, especially in some markets like LA. But it's like, what's the one thing that makes you different from everybody else?
I just want to say, hearing everything that you said is honestly so inspiring. And so, I guess my question is, how did you balance organizing, like with other aspects of your life, especially with additional?
How do I balance? I oftentimes didn't. I mean, I tried. I keep trying. Obviously, even me starting my own firm was part of like that, like balancing of, figuring out like I can't continue waking up at 4 a.m. to go bargain a contract at Tarsana and be back at 10 o'clock at night just to do it all over again in Burbank and then do it the next day in Indio, So and especially, for those of us that like do work that is values driven, we do work that we take a lot of pride and ownership because like we really feel like it really, really matters. Like for me, like so easy to just get like, and I did, I got married very young. I had kids very young. I, transitioned jobs, in the middle of like doing my master's program. There's times where like I focus more on like my career and my work and, right now trying to find that balance and spending more time at home and, and spending time with my kids. So, I wish I could tell you like that there's like, like, yeah, we can do it, but, I can tell you that all of my friends, who are either in elected office or, that have families, it's a struggle for all of us. So I think that the most important part is not so much on like, how do you do it? Because there's no way that we can all do it. But it's rather of how do you find the strategies and the drive that's going to help you support you through that. And going to your question about being a woman of color and being the reality, and like I wish that by the time that I stood up here I could tell you like it's so much easier, like you got this, like it's not like that, not like that at all. It's still going to be very hard. There's still going to be a double standard. You're still going to be judged differently. There's still going to be very little room for you to, make any mistakes. Like, don't, that's hopefully, by next few years we continue to change that. But right now, and what I've had to face, so for me, it's not so much how do I do it all, but rather how do I allow myself to find the support to be able to get through it and to like really sometimes endure, but really enjoy more than anything, the work.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we do have to wrap it up. That is all the time we have for questions. I would like to thank Violeta Aguilar-Wyrick for joining us today for this UCR School of Public Policy Community Seminar and Alumni Spotlight. It is truly inspiring to hear all the hard work you have done since high school and your journey with unions, campaigns, and so much more. You really helped me personally as well to see the realities and how you found how you are a good organizer. And we all have to kind of find the things that we do best. Thank you as well to our audience members for joining us. Please consider attending some of our other upcoming UCR School of Public Policy events. On February 29th, we will host a policy debate on homelessness, which will be guest judged by Board of Officers of the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. And it'll be right here, actually in the Alumni Center tomorrow. On March 4th, we will host a seminar by another alumnus, Samuel Roberts, who is currently a public communications officer at San Diego Association of Governors. And on March 16th, we hope you will join us for UCR's Highlander Day of Service, when the School of Public Policy will set up care packages for the homeless. We are also accepting volunteers. You can learn more about events like these hosted by the UCR School of Public Policy by visiting our website at spp.ucr.edu. While you're there, you can also learn about our Master of Public Policy program and our newly launched combined BA/MPP program. Additionally, you can also listen to and watch our official podcast series, Policy Chats. Thank you so much for being here with us for this seminar. Have a great rest of your day.